Good afternoon, everybody. This is Renee Hunter from the Insight to Impact facility from Cape Town. Thank you so much for joining us on the first webinar for DataHack4FI Season 3. We're very excited to have you all, and we're also very excited to have our three panelists, Betty Wilkinson from FSDZambia, Gerald Otim from Ensibuuko, and Nifemi Oluboyede from Carbon in Nigeria, who will be talking to us about some of their experiences with financial inclusion, and specifically financial inclusion in data. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. Just to make sure that we don't have a lot of feedback and a lot of confusion about the sound, all of the attendees are currently muted. So that means that we can't hear you speak. We do have a Q&A functionality, which you can find either at the top or the bottom of your screen. So you can put in any questions that you have there. If it's something that we can answer throughout the webinar, then my colleague Lita, who's sitting behind his computer here, will answer you directly. Otherwise, we'll deal with all of these questions at the end of the webinar, and we'll engage with them on a content level there. Then finally, also we have my colleague Komatsu, who is on the DataHack for Financial Inclusion team, who is online at the moment. So if you do have any practical questions related to the process of the competition, she is online and she can answer some of those questions as well. And we'd like to do that at the end of the webinar. So before I hand over to Betty for the first presentation of the webinar, I'd like to just give you some tasters to get you thinking around what the topic of this webinar is going to be. As you know from the title and from some of the information that you've received thus far, our webinar is really meant to give you a taster of what financial inclusion really means, and specifically what it means for you in your business and how you could use data to address financial inclusion. So to get your creative juices starting, I've got a couple of questions that I'd like you to answer in the polls. Gerald, Nifemi, and Betty, you are also allowed to answer. So you will see a poll launching right about now in your screen. And the question is, what is the most common fintech application that DataHack for Financial Inclusion participants have innovated on in the previous seasons? So based on your experience with data and financial services and fintechs, which of these different types of fintech applications do you think had a lot of data innovation in the previous seasons? So we're going to give you just under a minute to all get your answers in. Okay, it's neck and neck between two of these. Let's see if that changes still. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. We've got a clear winner, digital SACCOs, and that is indeed the correct answer. From the last two seasons of DataHack for Financial Inclusion, that has been the area where we've seen most innovation, where solutions were developed for savings groups to digitize their services and hopefully gain some insights from the data collected from how these groups manage their money. So related to not the last two seasons of DataHack4FI, but the new one, I've got a question around which is the new country that has been added that didn't previously participate. And I've opened the poll now. I think this should be an easy question. Or maybe not, actually. The answers are quite dispersed. Okay, cool. I'm going to close this poll as well. The majority of you actually got it right. It is indeed Nigeria. We're very, very excited to have Nigeria as part of the new DataHack4FI. And that's also why Nifemi is online today to represent the new country that is joining DataHack for Financial Inclusion. So we're very, very excited to see what comes out of there. And finally, the last question about the competition before we continue, before we go into the content of the webinar. I was wondering, what do you think is the sector that the last two winners of DataHack for Financial Inclusion were active in? And it's actually a coincidence that the two of them were active in the same sector. Okay, these answers are coming in very, very quickly. Okay, there's some confusion there. There's, again, two clear leaders. Okay, it's neck and neck again. Okay, I'm going to end it now. Again, I'm a little disappointed. I thought these were going to be very tricky questions, but you got it right. It is public transport. We had MobiTicket and WasInsure that won the last two seasons, both from Kenya and both in public transport. So we're actually very, very keen to see whether some of the other countries can finally dethrone them. And maybe that's a challenge that one of you on the call here can take on. You'll notice that my colleague Lita put the links to some of the related publications in the chat, so you can go read up about some of these previous winners there if you're interested. And then I'd like for us to move on to talk about financial inclusion. And that is something that Betty Wilkinson will be telling us about. Betty works with FSDZambia, and financial inclusion is really her bread and butter. So she will be presenting to us. Let me just get her PowerPoint presentation up. And Betty, I will hand remote control over to you now. And then, or Betty, unless you prefer for me to click for you, whichever you prefer.
Might be better, just because this is the first time I'm using the system in this way.
Okay, no problem. Then you can just indicate to me next slide and we'll collaborate on that way.
Just rechecking, I have 20 minutes or 15 minutes?
15.
15, okay, that's a last minute. Anyway, let me see if I can speed through this fast.
Cool.
Okay, so good afternoon, nerds, and thank you for coming. My daughters tell me that as parents, we are the digital immigrants and they're the natives, but there's still a few things we know that can help you move ahead in your data, AI, and digitization contributions to our fourth industrial revolution, which is where you're in right now. Purpose of this presentation is to introduce you a little bit to financial inclusion, to FSDZambia, talk a little bit about the challenges and the options for digital services, give you an idea of some pain points and where those can be addressed, and think about a little bit where you can go next on this stuff. Next slide. So this is a definition for the financial inclusion. It's a little bit deeper for one. It's a bit broader because we look at the range of services, not just for the poor, but for everybody. Because you recognize that low-income households are a lot less likely to be included, but there are others who are also excluded. So we consider the importance of having better understanding about financial services and the options that are available. So people need to make informed choices. This is really important. Then we value the formal and informal services. So I'm a member of a savings group as well as having a bank account. And so both of those have advantages and disadvantages. Services need to be available nearby, and they need to be from organizations and people that clients feel comfortable engaging with, both in terms of an office environment and also the people who are providing the services. Services need to be affordable. That's pretty straightforward. Services need to be understandable. I mean, microinsurance is pretty complicated, but it's a lot easier than regular insurance. So how can clients understand this, and how can they decide on whether or not it's the right thing for them? And the services need to be sustainable, so financial institutions will actually continue to offer them without having to be subsidized or otherwise supported. This is important to understand. It's the opening up of financial markets so that all citizens have the opportunity to understand, use, and choose about a wide range of financial services so their lives can be made better, and that includes you. Trust is an essential element of the engagement on these, and the results of better financial inclusion must be better lives, right? So it has to be, your life has to change, otherwise why have you wasted your time? Okay, so the next slide, please. So why is financial inclusion important? So here you see some women who are looking at information on financial services and weather-based crop insurance, which is being offered to over 1 million people in Zambia right now. So financial inclusion is important because it improves employment, business opportunities, and household well-being, because it increases local and national growth and employment, because it's more effective and efficient as a social policy outreach tool, because it facilitates new private sector business models. But this doesn't happen if there are really weak institutions, really weak regulators. And you must remember that it starts here and it goes down and then it goes back up again. So there's a U curve or a J curve in terms of how these programs grow. And there's a lot of research, which I'm not going to quote too heavily here, but if you look at the CGAP studies, there's lots of evidence on how the financial services have a positive impact on not only on growth, but on the inclusiveness of growth, and whether or not a broader set of people are actually benefiting from economic growth of any kind. And CGAP also looked at the local economic activities, that if you have more financial services available in an area, there's more local economic growth as well as national economic growth. And then finally, there's pretty well established literature for those of you who are interested in this, and so there's a lot of data on this too, that under normal circumstances, the degree of financial intermediation is not only positive assigned with growth, but with the balancing, it actually causally impacts growth. So if money is available, if money services are more widely available, there's better growth and it's more balanced and more interesting. And then the policymakers really need to understand the importance of this, nudge it, push it, and use the data, stuff like that. So this is why it's important. It's important because it helps growth, helps balance growth, helps everybody grow. Next slide, please. This is from a 2015 IMF study that looked at 6 countries and said, how is more access to credit drive growth? And what they found was that if you have 1% increase in growth, you have 1.2% growth in the economy associated with that credit increases. In Zambia, our credit markets have been data weak until recently, but now Zambia stands at the top of the heap in Africa in terms of its availability of credit market monitoring data. Quarterly reports, and the data is also provided by the Bank of Zambia. So you can pick it up, you can look at it and see what's going on in the credit market. And the second thing that is important in Zambia is that biometric identities are going to be rolled out. And with that, then you have a lot more thinking about how does it affect controlling crime? How does it affect people traveling who died in a tragic bus accident and they don't have their NRC or ID with them? You know, accurate records, knowing know your customer stuff. All of these things can be improved with just one form of change in terms of data. And there are privacy concerns too, but this is a really important step for Zambia. Next slide, please. So is Zambia committed to financial inclusion? Guess what? They certainly are. And so there are 3 key areas where we see the commitment. The first one is the national government's commitment to Smart Zambia, which sits in the Cabinet Office and says we are going to drive digitization of all systems in the government. They're already starting with the Farmer Input Support Program and its associated microinsurance for weather and weather-based crop insurance. And they're also looking at a lot of other ways that people can learn about money and how it can be safeguarded, payments for social cash transfers, for example. The second one is the Bank of Zambia. It placed financial inclusion as one of their 5 strategic priorities in their 5-year plan, which is ending now, and it's carrying over into the new 5-year plan. And then they've taken real leadership in this area, and we're very happy to be supporting their ongoing work. Their research on gender and financial inclusion, the research on informal-formal crossovers, the research on small businesses and how those can change, and on rural finance. The third is a very significant discussion of financial inclusion in other policy areas. So you have the rural finance policy, you have the National Financial Inclusion Policy, and the National Financial Sector policy itself, which the strategy comes from. The First Lady's talking, saying that women should be better financially included. The Deputy Governor of the Central Bank saying all of these kinds of things too, and being a leader internationally in central bank driving financial inclusion for women. And then the donors' emphasis on financial inclusion in the range of programs, from girls' safety involving their own savings to agriculture programs that include financial education. So all of this is happening in Zambia right now, around you. Next slide, please. So this is Zambia's financial sector deepening Zambia in one slide. And so we're a market facilitator. What we do is we're often called a think and do tank. So we provide data, provide information. We help people do analytics. We stimulate innovation in the market, and then we lower costs for market players and cultivate understanding. So we assess and learn. We develop market opportunities. We say, where are you going? We'll help you get there. And then once you're there, we're away because you're a private or a public agency that can manage this process in the long term on your own. So we don't offer financial services. Instead, we offer information and we nudge you to do better in the market. So we work with the public sector. We work with the private sector. We work with fintechs. We work with pretty much anybody who's interested in increasing the financial health of the country. So that means also we do a tremendous amount in data, and we do a lot in digital finance as well. So we listen to this stuff and we think way outside the box. I mean, you can't imagine the kind of stuff that goes on in this office. You would be amazed. And so innovation's our air, and we breathe it just like you do. It's all about the market, making it work for everyone, not just for a few people. So we've reached over 1 million Zambians in the last 3 years. And so we expect to reach at least another 1 million in the next 3 years. So we're reaching a lot of people. We want you to as well. So we support the public and private efforts. So when people come to us with an idea, we say, okay, well, how will you develop it? How will you pilot it? How will you expand it? Have you talked to the clients yet to find out if this addresses their pain points, or did you dream this up in the board? So these kinds of things. We're part of a network of 10 FSDs. 2 of them are regional. One works in Southern Africa. That's Finnmark Trust, and it's the oldest of us. It's almost 20 years old. Then we have FSD Africa, which is much younger, and it does sub-Saharan African work. Then there are 8 others in different countries. The first ones that started were were FSD Kenya and FSD Tanzania, and they're about 16, 17 years old. We're one of the babies. We're only about 3, but we're doing very well here. We're owned and managed by a Zambian and majority female board. Our board members are chaired by the former governor of the central bank and 2-term governor, Dr. Caleb Fandanga. We are funded, as many nonprofits are, by donors. So DFID founded us, but we also have funding from Swedish SIDA, from RUFEP through IFED, and from Comic Relief and Jersey Overseas Aid. We have 29 staff, of which 27 are Zambian, and they work in 8 thematic areas to extend financial inclusion throughout Zambia. So now let's step back a little bit and look at the continent and where Zambia fits in it. So next slide, please. So if you look at these numbers, they tell you something. The blue ones are where formal financial services are. The green ones are informal only, and then they are financially included in formal and or informal if they're in red. So if you look at Zambia, Zambia is 3rd from the bottom. It's not doing too badly, but it's not doing too well either. So South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Nigeria, those are the ones where there's more formal inclusion. Ours is lower, but we are growing fast in the informal inclusion. You can see that us with Rwanda as well. And so what our objective is to push this back and say, okay, we want to have less excluded in the red area, much more in the green and in the blue. In Zambia, what's also important is that we have, we've operated savings groups very slowly, but they're starting to grow really fast. And we're discovering from our research, they are the entry point to financial inclusion writ large, because people do savings groups for 3 years, then they say, gee, maybe I need a bank account now. Maybe I need to talk about an insurance now. So this is important. We have 3 of these surveys, 2004, 2009, 2015. We anticipate launching another one next year in 2020 with the Bank of Zambia. And we'll be looking at the quality of these engagements as well as the quantity of them. So you have access to this data along with the others that I'm going to show you. It's free. You can download it off the Data First portal, which is the University of Cape Town. And you can use it as you wish to do your own analytics. We've done quite a bit as well. So the challenges in 2015 in Zambia. 40% of households still don't have any form of financial services. That means the only thing that they're doing is borrowing from friends and neighbors or saving with friends and neighbors. these people are more women, more rural. 2/3 of those excluded live in rural areas. So if you can help us figure out how to reach rural areas, you will be the kings and queens of this game. 80%. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we do need to be conscious of the time. Can I suggest that you find like your last concluding thoughts maybe in the next 3 minutes or so?
Wow. Okay, I thought it was I had a lot more time. I'm just going to then skim through the rest of the slides, and then, okay, so the next slide just shows you that there's a breakdown in Zambia showing that over half the areas don't have financial services. The financial lives of the poor slide, which is the next one, is financial diaries, and it shows that a lot of people are still saving cash at home and that they're spending a lot of their money on food, which means that our poverty is pretty deep. Cash transfers are a critical thing for in Zambia. This is important. The challenges in financial services in Zambia are level of education and youth. Our population is the 5th youngest in the world. The average age is 15.8 years old. The level of the education programs are still slow. So financial education is also important. And our population density is relatively low. Some areas are, you can go a day and not see a village. So these are also a challenge here, but we are working on it. And there's a lot more work going on in terms of connectivity for cell phones. By the end of this year, 93% of people will be able to have cell phone service access. So that becomes really important. So when you talk about credit examples of products, we're working with chiefs. So we have a picture here in the next slide that you can see. We're working with chiefs in Luapula to see how can we expand financial inclusion. You have to have the right kind of credit. You have to have accessible and low-cost services to saving. You have to have simple and understandable insurance. You have to have fast, easy, and cheap money to move around. And you have to have collaborations between banks and other financial institutions, as well as savings groups and other financial institutions. So mobile money operators are really starting to move this importantly. Most people want to save, but how to do it is a challenge. And we have to think about this week, just this week, Barclays Bank and MTN Mobile Money released a program where you can use your wallet, you can go into a store, you can buy on a POS terminal just as if you had a credit card. You just use your cell phone number and your PIN number. So these kinds of changes are starting to happen now in Zambia. So merchant funding is starting to open up. These kinds of innovations are really important to financial institutions, especially the formal ones, but also the shops because they're saving money as well. So what we're doing in FSDZambia that may be of interest to you. We're working on savings groups and growing them, doing master trainers, working with the chiefs. We're growing products on savings for school fees, on the cash box replacement by mobile money operations. We're doing banks and village shop models to do savings groups that actually do this into a bank and then transfer to the purchaser. We're working on partnerships for ultra poor to savings groups. We're also looking at expanding insurance of different kinds, both dairy cow insurance and also crop insurance so that farmers can be protected more effectively. We're helping 6 companies to generate other kinds of things as well in terms of their products to serve the poor. And we're doing some software. If you check out Football Yatu or you check out Zazu, you're going to find them on our website. And you'll see that these are very important movements forward to connect financial education with things that people like to do, like watching football. So what we see works for you. What we see works for you is bundling of financial services. That means you take a product, you have another product, you have another product, and you put them together and offer them as a group to potential clients. The second thing is the partnerships need to go. M&O Bank, insurance company, agribusiness, village shops, village suppliers, and financial institutions. So these partnerships are really important, and there is more collaboration in Zambia than in the past. Then finally on this area, the use of effective group structures. You can't just do one poor person. It's much better to say, okay, these 20 poor persons, and then these 20 poor persons, and then these 20 poor persons, because they can form themselves, they know who to trust, and they know how to help you with the services. In a group of 20, only one person has to have a cell phone. It'll be enough. Finally, use your digital tech. Help build trust and respect between and among clients and between clients and financial institutions and between them and you. And design for the client, don't design in the boardroom. these are the things that we found were really useful. If you have any questions, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. This was very, very interesting, and I'm sure you've given our participants a lot of future touch points as well. So to all of the participants on the call, if you do have specific questions to Betty, either in terms of some of the projects that they work in Zambia or some of the insights that she's had in the various projects, then please write them into the Q&A and we can engage with Betty at the end of the webinar. Then now, I have another quick poll before we move to the next part of the webinar, which is going to consist of 2 fintechs who will tell us about their experience with using data for financial inclusion. Now, we ran a survey a few years ago at I2I, I think it's been 2 years now, where we asked different types of financial service providers across the continent what some of their issues and experiences are with using data. And these are different types. So we asked banks, insurance providers, mobile money operators, fintechs, etc. And we got some interesting insights from there. So what I'd like from you is to get you thinking, which do you think was the most common challenge that fintechs faced in using data for their business? Not any kind of financial service provider, but fintechs specifically. So we've got 4 options there, and all of them are a challenge, but I want to know what was the biggest challenge. Okay, the answers are trickling in. Skill shortage, it's coming up. But budget constraints also a thing. Okay, I think we've got roughly half of the votes now. I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it here. We got most of the votes in. So as you'll see, the 2 that you voted for most were skill shortage and poor data quality. And I'm sure this is based on your own experience as practitioners in the field. The correct answer is, as you got right again, poor data quality. Lita will provide the link to this research in the chat again. And keep this in mind as we're going to chat to Gerald now from Ensibuuko. Gerald, I will quickly put your presentation on, and then I will give you power over the mouse, and then you can tell us about Ensibuuko's experience designing financial solutions for financial inclusion, specifically using data. So if you give me 1 second. So, sorry, my mouse isn't responding nicely. Okay, Gerald, you can now move your slides and take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure for me to participate on this panel. So Ensibuuko is a Ugandan fintech startup. We started the company in 2014. So we just about 5 years into operations. What we do is provide banking solutions for credit cooperatives, savings and credit cooperatives. Just to explain a bit for the benefit of those that might not know what savings and credit cooperatives are, they are member and community-owned microfinance entities. And what they do is they have the mandate to provide their members or community people the ability and means to save money and also to access credit from the pool of money that they save together. So to kind of set the context a bit, it's estimated actually by the International Cooperatives Alliance that about 50% of all of Africa's population belongs to some kind of credit cooperative. And in recent years, we have seen that credit cooperatives have taken the shape of more institutional and regulated entities. In Uganda's context, particularly 2 years back, the government of Uganda put in place a new regulatory act that now puts savings and credit cooperatives under the, and in fact, some of the savings and credit cooperatives are also now directly under the central bank's regulation. In Uganda, there is about 18 million people that belong to some kind of savings cooperative. And in total, they are serving about, so there's about 18 million people served by about 6,000 savings cooperatives in Uganda. And the market is growing quite significantly. Savings cooperatives vary from small 30-member groups to 30,000 member groups. Our particular customer, our largest customer in Uganda, has 34,000 members and 12 branches spread across the country. Now, in most savings cooperatives, this is typically what you will see. A lot of them still manage data and records on paper and rely heavily on cash. And there are a lot of difficulties and challenges, of course, that this presents, inefficiencies, fraud and corruption that characterize most of the savings cooperatives in Uganda. And these are some of the things that we sought to address or solve when we launched our product. So what we do is provide a cloud-based banking software platform that helps savings cooperatives go paperless. So everything that they have previously done on paper, they can now do on our platform. They can register or profile their members. They can manage and track and process savings, and they can generate loans and process loans and disburse loans and take records of all repayments. They use our platform to also manage their back office accounting, expenses, incomes, other forms of transactions. And we have a whole suite of about 40 plus financial reports that they use for their management, for their regulators, and also for their board. The application is web-based, and it also comes with a mobile app and USSD platform that allows members of these savings cooperatives to perform a range of different activities, to deposit and transact, check their mini statement and balance. We work with mobile network operators here to provide internet connectivity to our savings cooperatives. So we provide dedicated internet using the kind of technology they call APN, access point networks. And we've found that this type of connectivity makes internet access cheap and more reliable for our customers. Currently, we work with 50 savings cooperatives and about 2,000 savings groups. And altogether, we are managing about 480,000 accounts. We have also integrated our platform with mobile money. So last year, we completed our integration with MTN here in Uganda. So now members of SACCOs are able to deposit and withdraw money using MTN's mobile money platform. And records of those transactions are posted seamlessly and directly to our platform. So the SACCO administrators do not have to do any work to record those transaction records. We have found generally that the introduction of mobile money makes access to financial services more affordable and more convenient for the people that the SACCOs serve. And we've found that from the time that we launch mobile money, 2 months after we launch mobile money, a third of the transactions actually shift from cash to mobile money. And we think that that trend continues to grow, and we think that eventually we'll get to a point where mobile money is the primary form of transactions that SACCOs use. Now, 2 years back, we also discovered, after working with SACCOs for quite a while, that most of the SACCOs, savings cooperatives, were hugely undercapitalized. A lot of them, most of the members were demanding for credit, and SACCOs did not have the means to finance it. So there was more demand for loans than the SACCOs could actually meet. And we also learned that a lot of the SACCOs had tried to access credit from banks, but most of the banks were reluctant to lend to them because they didn't have visibility on the financial performance of these savings cooperatives, and they really did not have data to make any kind of lending decisions towards them. And where banks had actually lent SACCOs money, the interest rates were really high because those types of loans were classified as high risk credit. So what we did, we designed a data project that was supported by I2I, and we built a loan profiling platform for savings cooperatives that use our platform. So what that does is it allows us to advise financiers, people that are interested in lending money to SACCOs, how the SACCOs are performing and what their portfolio quality looks like, so that financial institutions, at least we help them do most of their due diligence. So any information any financial information that would inform their decision on whether or not to lend a SACCO, we provide that on a single platform. Just to walk you through the process. So the process for this, for us, we started with an experiment, a no platform experiment. So we wanted to actually experience what the process is to lend money to SACCOs. We found a bank partner that put together a $350,000 loan facility. We identified 4 savings cooperatives, and then we experimented what the process looks like to assess them for credit, to finance them, and manage, the entire repayment process. We learned from that, and we also then started working on our first MVP to automate and digitize that process. We did interviews with different banks to really understand what their processes are internally. We also involved one of our lead investors that had interest in lending to SACCOs, but never really had a means to do that. So we did a lot of tests and internal iterations, and the MVP was ready for our pilot this year. So this month we are doing a soft launch of the platform. We have already mobilized $500,000 capital facility from internally from some of our already existing investors. And we have already set up an in-house financing unit that will be lending money or providing capital financing to savings cooperatives that use our platform. And we hope that after 1 year of this pilot, we will fully launch the platform and open it up to other external financials. And then we might also, it's part of our plans to have an independent financing entity that provides capital to SACCOs that use our platform. The main condition for us to finance SACCOs is that the SACCO has been on our platform for at least 6 months. So we have some historic data that we can use to assess them for credit, and that the SACCO also has opted to share data on the platform so that we can analyze it and assess it for credit purposes. So that's it from us, and open to questions.
Thank you so much, Gerald. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I've also got some questions for you to discuss during the Q&A. But before we go into that, I hope that everybody can please just remember their questions and write them down in the Q&A section. I would now like to go to the other side of the continent, from East to West Africa, and ask Nifemi to please give us an introduction into what Carbon does, which also uses data for financial inclusion in different ways, which you'll discuss with us, but through very different types of products. So I'm very excited to hear about carbon. Nifemi, I've given you, how do we call it? Clicking power, so you can control your PowerPoint from your side, and you've got roughly 10 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Nifemi from Carbon. Sorry, I'm still trying to find my way around. Clicking. Okay. Okay, great. All right. So I'll just start with my slides, and then after everything, we could have a couple of questions, which I'm more than happy to answer. So everything I'll be talking about is pretty much who is Carbon, what do we do, our target market, how we use data, Bloom, and then myself. So the slide you have here is pretty much an overview of what the Carbon mobile app looks like. On the other side is a very brief history of Carbon and the company that owns Carbon. So OneFi, as we like to call it, One Finance and Investment, was formerly known as One Credit and was established in 2012. And at the time, we were a brick and mortar lending facility, lending outfit where people would usually come and fill forms, very long forms, and then in the space of 48 hours thereabouts, we have the manual loan underwriting process where people can get credit. Another important detail is that OneFi is a CBN licensed financial institution, and yeah, arguably Nigeria's #1 consumer lending outfit. In the space of 7 years of existence, we've given out over $65 million in credit. Towards the end of last year, we obtained a BBU credit rating, the first for any African fintech, and we're super excited about this. So about the Carbon mobile app, so far we've had over 1.4 million downloads on Play Store. We're currently working on the iOS version. So streamlining my information to Carbon as the product now. Again, Carbon is a product of One Finance. And before the name Carbon, we used to be known as Pay Later. Pay Later essentially means that you get the money and you have, or you're at liberty to pay, to repay later. Pay Later as the product was given birth to in 2017, at which point we shifted from paper applications and went extremely digital, and we've remained digital since then. Interestingly, in 2018, which was last year, we disbursed 591,560 loans, valued at about 13 billion naira, which is about $36 million. Interestingly, the year before that, 2017, we did 3 billion in loans. That's about a little over $10 million. So year on year, we would say that we've experienced some growth. However, one of the interesting things that happened last year was beyond giving out credit, we transcended into a full-fledged digital financial service platform where beyond just giving people credit, we're now able to effect funds transfers, bill payments, and we even allow people to be able to make investments. So I'll give a brief history of how that came to be. Okay, so this current slide pretty much shows all the things that we do on Carbon mobile app today. However, one of the things that informed, or one of the things that got us to this point, would be our target market. So essentially, we want to reach everybody. And one of the things that we found is Nigeria as a country, we just have a certain demographic of people that would not touch your product just because it's about credit. So there's a very good percentage of Nigerian citizens that are just averse to the idea of credit. They will do transactions, they will do investments, they will do other things, but they just don't want to take a loan because they don't want to be indebted to anybody. So these were some of the things that we saw. These were some of the feedbacks that we had that gave birth to expanding beyond credit and saying, you know what, we can do something for everybody. Let's be financially inclusive. Again, carbon as the name that replaced pay later came because we felt carbon is an essential element for human living, and our intention was to be ingrained in the core of everyone and their financial decision making, ranging from when they process the transactions. We want them to think carbon anytime they want to process transactions. When they need credit, we want them to think carbon as the option or the first choice. When they have so much funds and they need to save or invest for the rainy days, we want them to think carbon. So essentially, we want carbon to be everybody because, well, going back to chemistry class now, we know that there is some element of carbon in us. So going to the part of how we use data, one of the things that I said we did with pay later back then was we ensured that the system for assessing credit was fully digital, ranging from the application to the verification. So we pretty much had to do away with the physical process of underwriting loans. And the only way we could effectively do this was with the data that we were able to get, which would explain why we started out with Android, because you're able to access data from the Android devices based on customer feedback, which may not usually be the case when you're using iOS. So I broke down the three data entry points that we have, which will be data provided by the customer, data from third-party providers, and transactional data. So breaking it down, data provided by the customer would usually be the information we ask every customer that comes up every time they want to apply for a loan. So we ask you for information ranging from your date of birth, your job, what you do currently, what you earn, where you live, is it a rented apartment or is it your own place, how much do you pay for rent if you do pay rent. So we ask whether you're married, if you have children. The idea is we want as much information from you as possible, because one of the essential parts of the credit that we give out is the fact that we don't take any form of collateral. So data is very important for us because data essentially is the collateral that we have. So we want to know as much as possible about you. And in order to be able to do this with our eyes closed when we go to bed at night, we've had to work with a lot of government agencies. So we are able to reference data. So we're integrated to virtually all the national identity platforms that we have in Nigeria, from the National Identity Management Scheme, the driver's license, your international passport, everybody, your voter's card, and all of that, so that at every point in time, we're able to verify the actual identity of everybody based on the information that they provide. One of the things we also have is integrations with the credit bureaus, so that every time you take a loan, we're able to report to the credit bureau. And for those who have existing loans in other places, we're able to get that information from the credit bureau. That will be basis for either denying them or giving them very low very low loan offers. Now, the third one, which is the transactional data, came in a lot more recently, in the sense that when we started, we'd usually just disburse the loans to whatever bank account you specify. But last year, we incorporated a wallet system into the mobile app, where we would usually disburse the loans into this wallet, and then we made the platform a lot more interesting, in the sense that you could now process all the transactions you usually process from your bank account on the app. So we integrated with the Nigerian interbank settlement system to allow transfer of funds to any bank account in Nigeria. And we were able to offer this service for 20% of the standard fee. So again, that was an additional incentive for people to use our funds transfer option, because from being charged about 50 naira per transfer, we offered the transfer service for 10 naira. And yeah, we were able to get traction from them. And one of the things that helped us to do is we're now able to see what people spend their money on. We're able to make more intelligent decisions as far as lending to them is concerned. So based on your spending patterns, based on the things that you spend your money on, we're able to say that, okay, this person can get a better loan offer the next time it comes to us. So essentially, we're trying to do what the banks are not doing. Because usually, when you want to take a loan at the bank would probably need to look at your statements, look at inflows and outflows and all those things. And we're saying we want to be your digital financial platform. And based on what you do, we can easily give you a very good credit and you're happy. The last slide there is called Bloom. So Bloom is a product that we came up with early this year. It's a community for women in business and aspiring business women. Interestingly, what gave that to Bloom was we found out that of our customer base, we only had 15% female. And for us, we found that to be a bit troubling, because if we have these interesting numbers that we do and we still have a large chunk of the economy that we're not servicing, it was something we're looking into. So we brought a new person on board who launched the Bloom product, which was supposed to offer women in business, business advisory, guidance and support, loans, and then a lot of discounted services. So we would usually reach out to them, see what they want to do for budding entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs. We look out for what they want to do. We give them business advice, and we're able to partner with some of the major providers of the services they're looking to render, and we can offer them discounted services, heavily discounted loans as well, and everybody is happy. So one of the big results we've had from that is that in a little over 3 months, Bloom was launched in February, and right now our female customer base has grown from 15% to about 34%. So yeah, that's as quick a rundown as I can do of Carbon in 10 minutes. I'm more than happy to have questions and share thoughts as much as possible. It's been fun. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Nifemi. This was very, very interesting. Okay, let me...
I don't know, the last slide didn't come up. That's where I say thank you. So.
Yeah, let me, oops, take back control of the mouse quickly. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nifemi, and thanks, Gerald, for sharing some insights about your business. We really appreciate all of the information that we got from you. I would now like to move over to Q&A. So I've got a few questions written down here, but we also received some questions through the Q&A function in Zoom. So I suggest we move through them. However, if we don't have time to go through all of them, both Gerald and Nifemi provided their contact details on the slides, and we'll share all of the presentations afterwards. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the presenters as well as the team at i2i, then we can help you. So, okay, let's see. Okay, here is a question from Dalmas about Carbon. Can you share with us your experience in getting data from third-party providers to assess clients for loans?
Okay, I'll answer that. So the experience we have really is, it's quite interesting because it's largely based on leveraging on relationship 1, and 2, knowing who has the data that you're looking for. So one thing I can tell you is we're probably integrated to nothing less than 10, 15 partners for different reasons. As far as data is concerned, for instance, we'll look at large companies or say payroll service providers that we can work with for customer payroll data. However, we would usually attach a clause or some sort of consent clause to it. So if a customer is coming to take a loan, for instance, and we are going to be checking with his employer for data, we would usually require the customer to give us consent to get the data from the employer, and we would present that consent electronically to the employer or the payroll provider of the employer to say that we need this person's data over this period as requested, and then we're able to incorporate that into our system. The other thing, another data entry point we have is the credit bureaus, which by virtue of what we do is direct. So for every lender, you're expected to have to report all loans to your to any of the. So we have 3 credit bureaus in Nigeria, so you're expected to report every loan to at least 2 of them, and vice versa. So if you're also going to be giving anybody any loan, you're also expected to check with the credit bureaus. Another data source will be the interbank system. So in Nigeria, we have this interesting scheme called the bank verification number. It's a unique identifier across all your bank accounts. So you're expected to have that number, and with that number, you're able to retrieve every bank account you have across all commercial banks. So if you have accounts in 4 or 5 different banks, your BVN number is what ties you to that bank, and it has your personal details, your biometric details, and all those things. So yeah, the Nigerian ecosystem pretty much is friendly as far as data referencing is concerned. Again, the important thing is some level of consent is required. So if I'm going to be getting your data by your BVN, it's because you provided me with your BVN and said that I can get as much as I can from it. I hope that answers the question.
I think let's assume that it did. Here's another question which is relevant to both Carbon and Ensibuuko, I think. Oh, where did it go? The question is, how do you help clients who are in areas where they can't access banks or even mobile phones, poor network coverage? Because both of the solutions do rely on digital technology. So for both Gerald and Nifemi, and I see Betty did provide an answer as well. Could you give us a little bit of an explanation of what you do in areas with poor network coverage? Do you have solutions for that?
So to be fair, we don't have all the answers to that just yet. One of the things that we did last month was to file for, with the Nigerian Communications Commission, was to file for a USSD code, because one of the things that we found is even though people don't have access to banking services in some of these areas, the data that we have from telecoms providers suggests that a larger percentage of, or there's a huge gap between banked people and people with mobile phones. So that allows us to be able to leverage on that extra space. That's another 20 million individuals that have smartphones but don't have bank accounts. So with the USSD, we are able to address some of their needs. Eventually, we are also, or we're heavily exploiting the option of having carbon agents that would be on the ground and go to some of these areas, onboard customers, open accounts for them. And eventually the idea is get carbon out there in the rural parts, let them know carbon, let them use carbon. So eventually we want carbon to be available on Android, iOS, and the web, and most importantly via USSD, which is like the simplest and the most basic form of interacting with financial services so far. Yeah.
Gerald here. So it's true that our web platform does require internet. Most of our customers are rural based, and some of them are in places with weak internet connection. So this is something that we're very much aware of when we started building our platform, and we designed certain solutions very early on. One of these solutions I actually hinted to during my presentation is an internet solution that we co-designed with two MNOs in Uganda, MTN and Airtel. One that allows us to provide a dedicated, well, it's point-to-point connection. So it's a kind of connection that uses a private link to allow our customers interact with our servers directly from their sites remotely and doesn't use public internet. So it's a dedicated GSM link that allows them to do that. So we pay about $10 per month for every SIM card that has this connection, and our SACCOs only require one SIM card at each of their sites. We have found that in places where we have used this type of internet, the speeds have been significantly better because the traffic through our pipeline is controlled because it's dedicated, but also it's designed to work even with the 2G connection. So we found that in places with 2G networks, our customers are still able to access our platform and use it well. But it's also true that there are certain places where we have found really, really weak connection that even with our internet service, our customers are not able to access the platform. So what we have done in those circumstances, we install repeaters at the sites of the cooperative. And what a repeater does is that it pulls the closest internet signal that it can get and then boosts it, or redistributes it within the premises of the cooperative. And we have found actually that where we have set up those types of devices, the connection is much, much better. But it's also true that sometimes we meet cooperatives that are in places with no internet at all, and we cannot do anything about it. Mobile phones are required when our customers need to interact with the service, mostly on USSD. We found that mobile phone ownership here in Uganda is quite high, relatively high. At least it's somewhere in there, 70%. And that even when people don't own a mobile phone, at least they have access to it within the household. And we found that that in itself has not been such a major issue here in Uganda.
Cool, thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. I realize that we're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask one more question of Betty, if all of the participants are happy to hang around for a couple more minutes. Betty, as some of the attendees of this webinar, I presume are either already participating or planning to participate in the Data Hack. And even if they are not, these are all people that are active or interested in the data for financial inclusion space. I was wondering, from your experience in Zambia, what are some of the most exciting data-driven solutions that you've seen, that you get really excited about, that you think are great examples that people should maybe explore more?
Wow, okay. That's a really complicated question. Let me talk about a couple of things that I've been watching that may be of interest to those who are doing data hacks. One of the things I'm watching is what's happening with the climate change, because climate change is really crucial across our region. And so data is starting to emerge on showing some of the losses, gains, and what's happening in terms of options for changing weather index insurance, what the options are. The data is starting to come out, and I think that that's really interesting. There's new companies that are starting to say, we could do this, we can afford it, we can calculate it and make sure that it works, and we can actually pay farmers. And in Zambia, Smart Zambia has actually developed a platform to receive the funds as part of the Farmer Input Supply Program, and then to deliver the claims in the same reverse direction. So they don't have to go through government. They can just be immediately passed through from the private company. So government actually doesn't have a role to play except facilitation of the communications of money in both directions. So I'd be looking at that data for farmers and saying, geez, 75% of these farmers now have their cell phones on a database. Could we use that database to start providing services to them like savings? Could we provide services to them like other forms of insurance processes, like maybe travel insurance, microinsurance, which exists in Zambia, maybe some funeral or health insurance for transport to and from clinics, which also is a problem and exists in Zambia. We're watching all this with the
Betty, are you still there? You dropped off for a second. Betty, can you hear me? Can all the other participants hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Oh, I'm not too sure what happened there, but maybe it's good timing since we have gone over a little bit. Betty, I'm not sure why we lost you. I think this would be a good time to then close off the webinar since I have kept you a little bit longer than we promised to. To recap, as we promised, we will send all of the slides to all the participants, as well as the links that Lita has been posting in the chat, directing to some of the case studies on the previous DataHack participants and some of the other research that we mentioned briefly. There are still some unanswered questions in the Q&A, which I think will, most of them make it clear who the question is for. So what we can do is we can forward them to the appropriate panelists, and then they can, I think we'll make a plan on the digital community and see if we can put the, we'll share the questions in some way with you. So if you haven't done so yet, please join the digital community on Facebook. You can just search for DataHack4FI community. On Facebook, there's a group there. So we'll share all of these things there as well. Then you can access it there. And then we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which is in 2 weeks, I believe, the 29th of May. So thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. The link to the Facebook group is going to be posted just now, so you can access it in the chat as well. And yes, then we look forward to seeing you the next time.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks.